Winners win. I'm a winner. We're going to win.
Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_GB right there on X. And then joining me tonight to cover this busy day for the Florida Gator football program through the transfer portal is co-host Will Miles at Will Miles SEC. Will, it's been a while since we've gotten together. Hope you had a Merry Christmas. Hope you had a Happy New Year. We are in 2026. First time we've gotten together for the new year. We kind of just laid low as much as we could. A bit. I did take some time off, surprisingly, around the holidays. But glad to be with you, man, here in 2026.
Yeah, man. I just assumed you were on vacation today since all the recruits were coming in from Florida. I figured, I texted you this morning, we doing the pod today? Like, he's probably in Barbados or something. But no, it's look, it's been an exciting day. Certainly, anybody who was sitting there on X refreshing their feed today. This, it's funny. One of my complaints about college football over the past decade has been early signing day and how that February signing day always had urgency because it was like that day. I can remember sitting in grad school, like just hitting refresh as Tim Tebow and Percy Harvin committed to Florida. And, I think Spikes was already there, or one of the three was already there. And then the other two committed that day. And we don't get that anymore. So this portal window has sort of brought that back in some capacity.
I said the same thing on Bill King's show this morning up in Nashville. I said, man, this is about as close as we get to that now, because early Saturday, just everybody commits so early and rarely, you pretty much know who's going to be in your class. This 2-week window here.
No idea.
No idea. Okay, whoever visits is probably giving you a good indication because that's the way it has turned out. But still, it is just, we didn't even know who was really visiting till a day or two before they were on campus. And then some names we heard while they were on campus or a day after and all. This is as close as we are getting to that.
I will say, with all the tampering that's been going on, I'm amazed at the news and that there's just guys we haven't heard of and, or guys that we at least hadn't really thought of who might be available. But obviously guys like Philo and that sort of stuff have been in the news and the discussion for an extended period of time at this point. Not a real surprise. When we look at the transfer list of guys coming in, there's lots of connections to the Gator staff for those guys coming in. So not a huge surprise. At the same time, guys at positions of need, certainly. And it's funny. You started out the day and it was like Gator Twitter in general, I think was pretty antsy. Yeah. And then things started to fall and some news came in. It was like, oh, well, that's not bad. And then Florida State kind of overtook Gator Twitter in terms of being miserable online because they're having a rough one today, but then really the last couple of years. So, look, I think Florida's got a long way to go. I think Coach Summerall has a long way to go. You look at the number of guys who've left the program versus the number of guys who have committed to come in. There's quite a bit of balance. There's quite a bit of a misbalance there too. So what that really probably means is more still to come. And I was talking to Nick Knutson the other day about strategy for this sort of thing, right? Is that we see the prices going up and up and up and up and up for certain positions. But I saw a tweet the other day. Somebody said there were 188 quarterbacks in the portal and there's 132 FBS schools. So somewhere that game of musical chairs is going there's going to be a time towards the end of the portal period where the players start to get nervous. Yeah. I think early on, the programs are nervous saying, hey, these are the guys we've targeted. This is who we're going after. I think there's going to be an enormous amount of value on the back end of the portal as well, where you start being able to fill out your roster and fill out your depth and all that sort of stuff. And guys are going to have to make a choice. Do I go play for North Texas and compete for a starting job, or do I take a backup job at an SEC school where if there's one injury, now all of a sudden I'm starting an SEC school? For somebody who maybe is transferring from the North Texas type level, is that an attractive thing to go back to that level? Those are things that I think we're going to start to suss out, but it's a brave new world, man. Like I saw somebody the other day who was looking at transfer recruiting rankings from last year and trying to correlate that to to success this year. And look, some of the teams that had really high transfer rankings last year are still playing. And so,
and some are not.
Well, that's true. Look, it may be that there is some level of correlation between transfers and big time winning. I think what
Because
we
near
also
the top, it's really only LSU that's not playing.
yeah. Well, but the other thing is that I think we need to recognize that not everyone has embraced the portal in the way some of these other guys have. So there was less competition, probably less money for some of those guys in a way that it's not the same way this year and certainly won't be the same way next year. And college football's turned into an economics problem. It's turned figuring out, not even necessarily a cap, but you look at Texas Tech and the rumors about spending $5 million for the guy who transferred from Indiana before Cignetti got there and played for a terrible Indiana team, Sorsby. If you look at the rumors in terms of what they're paying him, and then you go, well, there's no way that can fit under the revenue share, essentially cap that the NCAA's put in.
Yeah.
Which means Texas Tech is thumbing their nose at the NCAA rule that, you got to justify NIL deals above that revenue share number. And the NCAA is going to go, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, we're not going to sue you because we're not going to enforce this because that means we'll get sued. So I think this is one of those things where a few years ago, Texas A&M recognized very early on that the NCAA wasn't going to enforce any of its rules when it came to like coaches being able to like if we remember this 2 or 3 years ago, coaches couldn't be involved in the consummation of these NIL deals, right? It's like the coaches don't know what's going on. How is it that guy got an NIL deal without the coach knowing about it, right? And I think we saw some messes at Florida because they were trying to be compliant with that sort of thing. Texas A&M took full advantage and wound up signing one of the best classes that we've seen in a long time. But obviously, the transfer portal, Walter Nolan was playing for Ole Miss last year. So things have changed in college football, have changed rapidly. I have no doubt they will change again next year as well, which means you really kind of do need an economics degree to figure all this stuff out. We'll talk a little bit about finances tonight, I'm sure. But, it's fun times for nerds, so I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, 11 portal gets for the Gators, and then the big news, of course, he never put his name in the portal, so he's not technically a portal get, but Jaden Ball, running back, is going to return for the Gators. Of course, it was up in the air. Was he going to enter the portal? Was he going to go to Texas? That was the school Georgia, Ohio State mentioned on the outside, but many thought because Jabbar Jaloot going to Texas that Jaden Ball might end up there. Never put his name in the portal, and we get the big news today with all these flurry of transfer portal commits that Jaden Ball is also going to return to Florida, so we'll get into that too. On this episode of Gators Breakdown, everybody hit that like button, leave some comments right there, subscribe right here as well on YouTube. Or your favorite podcast platform, but really help us out. Smash that like button. And, of course, that really, really helps us out. And then, of course, there's a lot going on in college football, transfer portal right now, but also on the field, college football playoff, and you can get in on the action right there at MyBookie. It's a great time. Great time to get in right there at MyBookie. Miami for the college football playoff against Ole Miss. 3-point favorites. The over-under for the game currently set at 52. In the other semifinal matchup, Indiana favored by 3.5 over Oregon with an under at 47. Right there at MyBookie. And, of course, NFL playoff action as well. Go bet it all at MyBookie. It's your one-stop sportsbook casino in one account, one wallet. Bet football. Then spend some time hitting those casino games. You don't have to switch apps. You don't have to jump to another platform. Straight up action right there at MyBookie. And if you're new to MyBookie, use our promo code Gators to get your first bet up to $500 fully covered. Make your play. If it doesn't hit, you get it right back with the bet back bonus. No stress, just a one-time rollover. So you're free to reload at any time. So sign up at mybookie.ag with promo code Gators and go claim your bet back bonus. I will. All right. Jaden Ball is back, not heading to Texas. He's going to be in the backfield for the Gators. Seth Varnador and I talked about this probably about a month ago when the word came out. So I gave my long spiel about the optics of it and how this really can be a building block for the offense under John Summerall, of course, offensive coordinator Buster Faulkner. Of course, it's a great outcome here for the optics, for the building block of an offense. I think it puts some skill players around the quarterback We'll talk about the quarterback position coming up there, of course, as well. But with Jaden Ball in the backfield, VB3, Dallas Wilson at receiver, I think a pretty good core of potential there VB3 a little more proven than Dallas Wilson. Potential with Dallas Wilson, we saw it against Texas last year. Jaden Ball, very proven. So skill player position can really be a plus for Florida, building around a quarterback, a young quarterback there, regardless of who it is for Florida. But big news, Will. I mean, one we've just been sitting and just waiting for the word. The transfer portal opened a few days ago. Jaden Ball's name not in there. Some optimism on the last few days of Jaden Ball returning to Florida. It turns out that way, and all the Texas reports that he was going to enter the portal, and he never did. And they were going to be the pick. Dallas Wilson was thrown into that too. Neither one of these guys hit the portal and ended up in Texas, but kind of just let you know the craziness of it all. But I think a big part of the conversation is, it's year one for John Summerall. So the optics keep the best player on the team. I mean, likely this is the best player on Florida's team, regardless of maybe of what it would cost. And you mentioned the money side of it just a second ago. And running back is a tricky part of that. The position has been devalued, but it has not been devalued as much as it has in the NFL. I still think there's a lot of value in the running back spot in college football, definitely more so than the NFL, but it has been devalued overall. I mean, Florida's been able to, just the last few years, bring in a Montrell Johnson and have success, bring in a Trevor Etienne and have some success, bring in a Jaden Ball and have some success. Now, a lot of that, Jabbar Jaluke's involved in that, but still, kind of just lets you know, all right, well, the running back position, you're still able to get some type of production from that spot and not really a whole lot of separation when you look at it. So kind of an example of plug and play in some ways. Some guys can do, a lot of the same things. But I just think, for John Summerall to walk in here and Florida's best player and in that group of Jaden Ball and Jaden Woods, and we'll see what comes of that, VB3, Dallas Wilson, Miles Graham, kind of that group of, these are the guys that we want to be building around. These are the guys that we want to be part of John Summerall's program as he gets started at Florida. Well, that group's pretty much intact. And like I said, we'll see what happens with Jaden Woods down the road. Florida's meeting with him tonight, by the way. So I just think optics-wise, production-wise, it gives you something on offense, I think, to fall back on, something that something is going to be there. Somebody that had to prove some things without a force on the offensive line in front of him. They were okay at times. But I still think Jaden Ball had to make a lot out of nothing, make some things happen that hopefully he wouldn't have to a lot of the times, but he did. So I just think all in all, for me, yeah, money side, there's probably some to it because of the running back spot. But all in all, glad Jaden Ball, number 13, still will be on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of come at it from the same perspective as you do, where it's like from an optics perspective and just not having to hear people complain about letting the best player go. In some ways, like just keeping that noise down, there's immense value in doing that. Now, CBS came out and reported that Baugh's getting north of $1 million. I've gone through and sort of looked for what essentially would be a $30 million cap in college football, and looked at sort of what starters are paid for and then the average spend at different at various positions. The reality is when it comes to starters in the NFL, the running backs are the 13th highest paid player. They're paid less than kickers. And so, $823,000 is sort of what you would figure that you would end up with for the college cap. For a starter, right? So if you're paying $1 million, then you got $200,000 that are not going to somebody else. But if you look at the overall position where you typically have on a 53-man roster 4 running backs, well, now you got $1.4 million as your total salary. So now it's a question of how do you cobble that together to where you end up right around that number for all the running backs that you bring into the room. So Florida, Baugh isn't the only guy they brought in today. I mean, they had Evan Pryor, the running back from Cincinnati, who came in and transferred. He's really different than Jaden Baugh. He was averaging up over, I think, 6.7 yards per carry the last couple of years at Cincinnati. So you're talking about a home run hitter versus Baugh, who's really a between the tackles runner. So you sort of diversified that room, right? I mean, I think when Trayon Webb or Katie Daniels or even Jacoby Jackson came in there, you weren't necessarily getting anything different than Jaden Ball. You were just getting Jaden Ball light. And and you're not necessarily, the hope is that you're not going to get that with Pryor. The other part is that sometimes you do have to overpay for a certain position. And if I look at the same $30 million cap number for quarterbacks, the number is $3.5 million. If you were to prorate it based on the $255 million cap for the NFL, which obviously is only 53 guys, and they spent out 50% of that cap on their starters. So if you look at the average starting salary in the NFL is $30 million, correlates to about $3.5 million for college. So now you got to start talking about the math overall. So let's say Aaron Philo came in at about the same price as Jaden Baugh. Well, if you add up the two positions, you've actually come in under budget, depending upon the number that Philo actually had coming in. So to me, those are the calculations that each of these programs are making. Now, I think, I've talked repeatedly that quarterback, offensive tackle, edge, wide receiver, interior defensive line, those are sort of the high level NFL positions that tend to have high cap numbers. But if you look at it, and this year in the NFL is actually a great example, the Chiefs struggled in many ways because Patrick Mahomes didn't live up to the way Patrick Mahomes has been in the past, but also because Patrick Mahomes makes an ungodly amount of money. And so they struggle to put a robust team around him. You look at a team like Baltimore, where Lamar Jackson struggles a little bit, and the team that they put around him isn't enough to prop everything up. You look at even a team like the 49ers, where Brock Purdy is a 7th-round draft pick, and they've been good over the last few years because they've had a lot of cap flexibility around a quarterback who wasn't making a lot of money. Purdy just got a big deal this past offseason, and so I think the 49ers are going to start to tail off. And even if you think about last year's Florida team, you had Lagway at the center of it, making a pretty significant amount of money. And were they able to fill that around him? And then when you don't get the quarterback play, now all of a sudden everything looks like a mess. So to me, this is all an economics problem. The ball return, I think, has an optics benefit, certainly, probably at a number higher than you will see at running backs in the future. And Florida will have to calculate, do running backs even stay if you bring them out of high school? Is it worth going and getting a recruit at the running back position, or you just go raid G5 for that? They're going to have to do that at all these different positions. And so figuring out, is it worth paying a guy to sit on the bench for a couple of years who will then become a starter, or is that guy going to bail and you've wasted money on him for the 2 years that he was sort of there as a depth piece? Those are all things people are going to have to figure out. The good part about Ball is he's not a depth piece, right? Like, this is a guy who showed, especially in that Florida State game, you can give him the ball 25 times. You can let him control the game. He made some really nice moves. I was there with my kids. You could see him make plays out of nothing during that game, where the offensive line did miss some blocks and he was able to pick it up for him. So, certainly a big get for Florida. I think in terms of just making the offense competent, Ball brings something to the table. And honestly, Nick and I were going back and forth about, all right, who's going to be on the cover of the magazine? And you're sitting there going, well, is Ball coming back? Because that's the obvious choice, isn't it? And I mean,
double players, Jaden Ball, Miles Graham.
Yeah, I mean, you could do something like that, certainly, right? But it is one of those things where the story of the 2025 season, at least in terms of anything that was good, was Jaden Baugh, and then was Dallas Wilson against Texas. And, the projection there in terms of what Wilson would bring. It's funny, you mentioned that Baugh didn't go into the transfer portal, but that doesn't even matter anymore, right?
No.
This was almost like Cignetti signing an extension halfway through the year, where it's oh, he's now the highest paid coach in college football. Good for him. And, you do the same thing with these players. I do wonder if it's going to come to that, right? Where if halfway through the season, game 6, the players just I feel like a raise. Let's renegotiate my deal. Now that we're 6-0 and heading into.
Hey, there was some talk that happened with Jaden Woods.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I think the interesting part in all of this is we celebrate people not going into the portal and loyalty and all that sort of stuff. But But I think even if you look at the guys who've gone in the portal for Florida, there's not a ton of guys on that list right now that I'm like weeping over losing. There's guys that I'm like, oh, that's significant. They're going to have to replace him. But I'm not going, oh, this is like production that will be very, very difficult to replace. I think Baugh was going to be somebody that they were going to really struggle to replace. I think the interesting thing is you look at a guy like Philo and you go, if he replaces DJ Lagway's productivity, I think we'll be disappointed. I think we're all going to expect more than what we got from Lagway last year, which means you're immediately starting with a higher baseline for next season than you had this season, irrespective of whether he like turns into a great player. So yeah, I mean, I think Baugh's sort of that first domino to fall. Like I said, I think long-term, if you're spending that kind of money on running backs, you've got the math all wrong in terms of where you want to allocate resources. But I actually do think, and I think this is something that teams are really going to have to figure out, is I think because quarterbacks are a year-to-year proposition now, that projecting a guy who can be great and getting him at a lower price versus finding an established guy like a Sam Levitt, like a Sorsby, those guys are commanding such an enormous salary that I guess you can't say a salary because they're not an employee, right? They're commanding such an enormous they're commanding such an enormous number that prevents you from filling out the depth everywhere else. And just like in the NFL, where right now the New England Patriots have like the best situation because they have Drake May, who may win the MVP, and he's making like $4 million a year. And then you look at who he's going to be playing and the teams that they're playing, the quarterback's making $30 million a year. Well, that $26 million difference can get allocated amongst the rest of the Patriots in a way that it can't for the team that they're playing. And that is a huge advantage in the NFL. And so, were I in charge of a team as a general manager, and I've been talking about like really strategically this stuff for a long time now, really ever since Billy Napier was fired, like I would be saying, we need enough confidence in our offensive coordinator that we can look at film and project, and we bring in a quarterback under our estimated cap max so that we can allocate that elsewhere. And I think Florida, quite honestly, probably executed that today.
Good deal. Good deal. Yeah. Love it. Love it. Love it. Glad Jaden Ball is back. Something to build this offense around. So, of course, we got a lot of commits to get into. We got into DJ Coleman. He was the only one to commit before this day. And now we've got, there were some on Monday, so many today on Tuesday. Coleman was the one on Sunday. We did talk about that right here on the last episode of Gators Breakdown, but a lot more to get into. But one comment I wanted to get into, because, Will, I don't know if you got a chance to check out the last episode, but it was toward the end of it, and it says, the name here, I probably, some people will take that a weird way. So I'll leave the name out of it just in case this said on the TV station and stuff. But what's up, Dave? Been a listener from the beginning, so I'm a huge Gators Breakdown fan. Keep up the good work. Been a pleasure watching you and your channel grow. Will, 2026, 10 years of Gators Breakdown, my friend.
Oh my goodness. And I've been here for 8 of it, man.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how fast that goes. And
Jeez,
I mean,
tell me about it.
You think about like some of those first episodes where, we're talking about Luke Del Rio, or at least I was talking about Luke Del Rio being the quarterback and McElwain and all that sort of stuff. We've certainly been through our fair share of pain with all the fans over the last decade.
Man, some of those early Luke Del Rio, Malik Zaire.
Oh my God! Like no, that
I was one who was on. I was so against that when Florida brought him in. I remember that storyline. That was one of our first episodes too, because I just that one we all got right, unfortunately. And hey, I mean we survived Doug Nussmeier as the offensive coordinator, which, to be honest, I think we all deserve a gold star for that. So, yeah, I mean, the dynamic of college football has changed a lot, but one thing that hasn't changed is that it's constantly entertaining. and 10 years, man, that's crazy.
That's a lot of episodes.
August will be 10 years. So heading into that 2016 season.
I had hair back when this thing started.
I think I had given up by then. But there was a lot of hat wearing, so I think I'm more known now for the the shaved head look. more, than Gators Breakdown itself and all that stuff. So it's kind of a calling card.
Now you just need to grow a goatee and start cooking some meth.
Well, I don't think I'm going to do that, but the podcast keeps me too busy. I don't have time for meth, Will.
I mean, it'll help keep you up at night, apparently. But yeah,
Brian,
congrats, man! 10 years. That's impressive.
Brian says I love Gators Breakdown, but my God, I hope this is the good times.
We all do. We all do, Brian.
Yeah, because he did say 10 years already. Yeah, it is. It is. And Dr. Penn, we'll get to another comment from Doctor in just a second because it does bring up a good question. And Will, you kind of hit on it just a second too. But yeah, congrats to 10 years there. So yeah, we'll kind of celebrate that throughout the year here. But it was at the end of that last episode. I'll put it earlier in this episode just to let people know because they heard that and they were like, my God, I cannot believe it's been 10 years. I can't either. So yeah. Woo. Just kind of crazy. But here we go. Lots to talk about right here. And like you guys said, hopefully this is the start of 10 more years, 20 more years, 30 more years, however long I'm alive and doing this. And this is the start of something under John Summerall we can all look back on and say, yep, there we go. That was the point. This is when it all turned around. All right. Well, part of that, of course, is building the roster and 11 players from the transfer portal right here for the Gators. A big, big haul today on this Tuesday. And we'll kind of just go offense, defense, and of course, we'll start at the quarterback spot. Not a big surprise. Quarterback Aaron Philo from Georgia Tech, the 18th ranked quarterback in the portal. Not started a game, or not a starter, has started a game for Georgia Tech, but thrown for 938 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 95 rushing yards, 16 carries in 2 seasons, backing up Haynes King, of course. 6'1", 220, played in 5 games as a true freshman. In 2025, he competed in only 2 games this past year to preserve a red shirt. In one of his last appearances of the season, threw for 373 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception in a 59-12 win over Gardner-Webb. Looking at some PFF grades, 76.3 PFF grade in 25, a 91.3 PFF grade in 2024, 57.8 completion percentage, 69.8% adjusted completion percentage, 11 big-time throws, 4 turnover-worthy plays, 12.5-yard average depth per target. So, of course, small school Will, 3-star recruit in the state of Georgia, set the record for all-time passing yards, 13,922. That was previously set by Trevor Lawrence. This is playing in the lowest division in Georgia high school football. So take that for what it's worth. That's up for you to decide how much you want to put worth on the high school qualification. They'll call it classification that he plays in. But it's really an interesting dynamic, Will. And the debate with Aaron Philo is how do you balance? This goes into the question here by Dr. Penna that I'll put up. Interesting dynamic because you have an option or a choice when you go shopping for a transfer portal quarterback. Do you go get a more well-regarded, more experienced quarterback, higher thought of, higher ranked, however you want to put that, versus one like Philo who has experience in the system, experience with Faulkner at Georgia Tech for 2 years, seems to be handpicked by Buster Faulkner. So it is an interesting dynamic of how do you balance that? What do you put more worth in with this? A higher ranked quarterback that has no experience with Buster Faulkner, or somebody we certainly have questions on because he hasn't played a whole lot, but certainly more familiar with the system, put up crazy stats in high school for whatever classification you want to put on that. And then Dr. Penna does ask the question here, thanks for the donation, who would have been your number 1 pick for a portal quarterback? So going with how I just laid it out, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, I'm not really turning down a high-profile quarterback, but I do like the situation here with Aaron Philo and Georgia Tech. Will, maybe you're pulling it up, but I'll pull it up right here for you. If you look at the portal rankings, Sam Levitt, number 1, Drew Mastamaker, number 2. He goes from North Texas to Oklahoma State. Brendan Sorsby, as you mentioned a while ago, Cincinnati to Texas Tech. Byron Brown was the 4th highest, going to Auburn from USF. Dylan Raiola, from Nebraska, still not going anywhere right now. Josh Hoover from TCU to Indiana. DJ Lagway comes in next. We'll see what his visiting Baylor tomorrow, coming off of FSU in Virginia. Deuce Knight's in the portal. Rocco Beck going from Iowa State to Penn State. Kenny Mitchie going to Kentucky. And then Ethan Grunkmeyer from Penn State to Virginia Tech. Austin Simmons, Ole Miss to Missouri. Cutter Boley from Kentucky to Arizona State. And then, a few other names. Then you get to Aaron Philo, a few other names that's in front of him right there. But you have him in front of guys like Anthony Calandra, who was just with Dan Mullen at UNLV. He's at Nebraska now. Colton Joseph going from Old Dominion to Wisconsin. Like some guys who did play a good bit of football this past year. So it is interesting in how you balance this. I like the situation here. I don't know. I think Buster Faulkner is a great OC. We've chronicled that. I think he could build a system that would be put up there to have success with probably any style of quarterback that you bring in. We've seen the power run with Haynes King, and we know his air raid background. So it probably could have success with a lot of quarterbacks here. But I do think for this situation in a transition, it might be a better scenario. And maybe I'm wishful thinking here and eternal optimist when looking at the quarterback spot. It might be a better scenario for Florida to find themselves in getting a quarterback Buster Faulkner has familiarity with.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how good Faulkner is at evaluating quarterbacks, right?
That's a good point, too.
Like, in many ways, we sort of hitched our wagons to Billy Napier and DJ Lagway as a package deal. And when that whole thing fell apart, like I anticipated us getting 2 years of Billy Napier and DJ Lagway because I didn't expect Lagway to be this bad. I expected us to maybe be arguing 8-4, didn't take a step forward. Like, we got to give him another year, like that sort of stuff. I didn't expect to go, wow, he's the worst quarterback in the SEC. What is going on here? I think outside of Philo and outside of Lagway, if I were to look at high school profiles, college performance, all that sort of stuff thus far, the two guys I would have targeted would have been Austin Simmons, the Ole Miss quarterback who started and lost his job to Trinidad Chambliss, and Bo Pribula, the guy who went from Penn State to Missouri and then, is still out there on the market, actually.
Yep.
And then honestly, though, if I were to look at
is 3 spots ahead of Aaron Philo on 3 rankings, by the way. Bo Pribula.
If I was without any history at all, the guy who tops the transfer market for me at quarterbacks, DJ Lagway. Like he's the guy that I look at and I go, the question is he fixable? And is he fixable in a different program? So I get why he's not at Florida. I understand why he's not there. Summerall had an interview today where he had nice things to say about Lagway for the most part. But that
was interesting, by the way.
But he might have been interviewed while he was at Florida State, and thankfully Florida State took somebody who really sucks, and so that probably means Lagway's going someplace else, which is good because I actually want to root for the kid because I think that in the right situation, Lagway is a redeemable player. But I mean, look, if you told me Austin Simmons was coming in, would I say he's a sure thing? No. If you told me Bo Pribula was coming in, would you tell me he's a sure thing? I would say, I think you're going to get above average play at the quarterback position with someone who can run a little bit like Haynes King. So I would have said, okay, yeah, I think like that'll be somebody who can put up some points. So the question then from Philo is now you're saying, okay, we're betting on an unknown in many ways anyway. How much does he cost? And that fundamentally, it's no longer about how good is the player in a vacuum. It's how good is the player per dollar is what really matters overall if you have any sort of semblance of a cap. Now, I think you can make the argument that the cap is self-imposed and that, schools like Texas Tech that have decided to just break the bank on their quarterbacks and potentially other players, let's say they have a $50 million war chest over there that, they're going to be in an advantage. But, if you have a certain amount of money to allocate, you have to allocate it wisely. And like I said, it's a 1-year deal. Right. So if Philo comes in, he's not any good. There's another, but you're able to build sort of depth around him. Well, now you go out and you get another quarterback next year, right? Like there's nothing that prevents you from going out and getting another quarterback next year. So really, then it comes down to the stubbornness of the coaches, right? Like, oh well, he was average. We're going to keep him here and expect a jump. Those are the places where I start to get nervous. Like, first year, like I do not expect most programs to operate like Indiana.
Yeah.
I think Kurt Cignetti is special as a head coach. If you look at all the quarterbacks who've played underneath him, I saw a graphic the other day looking at like the PFF rankings of all the quarterbacks he's ever been. There's just like a giant jump from year one, from year before to year after. Is Faulkner that kind of guy? I don't know. We'd have to sort of go and look at his history and all the quarterbacks that he's touched, but that's really rare, right? But quarterback play is where you win. So, in the past, we've sort of talked about, well, rotate the head coach until you find the right guy. And I think in many ways, that's kind of where we're going to be at in college football is rotate the quarterback till you find the right guy. The days of a quarterback being in any place for more than a year are probably over because you're going to go in the portal to get a guy. You're going to bring him in. He's already NFL eligible. So if he plays really, really well, off he goes. And if he plays sort of meh, he's going to transfer someplace else to bring somebody else in. And if he's terrible, he's going to transfer down. So like, there's just not going to be a lot there. Now, the interesting thing is that I do think that there was some talk. You and I even talked about Tramel Jones potentially getting some play at the end of the year, concerns about redshirt, making sure that didn't get blown, that sort of stuff. And the news coming out for Jones was he just wanted a chance to compete. So, it's entirely possible that if Jones is your floor in terms of like how good a quarterback play can be, then Philo's got to beat that, right? So if Buster Faulkner is comfortable with what he's seen from Tramel Jones, what he knows about Tramel Jones, that, hey, this guy is the floor of what I can get, and there might be significant upside with him and there might be significant upside with Philo, then all of a sudden the quarterback room looks pretty good as long as you've really got an open competition. And it's not just this is the hand-picked guy and we're going with him and oh crap, like, the floor on these guys is low. But I mean, I have no problem with it because I'm like, given all the guys in the portal, there's nobody that I look at and say Joe Burrow.
Yeah, right.
That was obvious to anybody who was paying much attention years ago. When I look at the high school stats for Philo, he's a tweener. Like Luke Del Rio had a completion percentage of 70% in high school, which is something that I always look at his senior year, but he only averaged 8.9 yards per attempt. Burrow, conversely, was at 72%, and he averaged 12.8 yards per attempt. And I harp on high school completion percentage because that suggests that somebody knows how to read a defense, but it only suggests that if their yards per attempt are pretty good. So Burrow almost at 13, Del Rio almost at 9. Philo was at 9.8 his senior year at 69.9%. So he's like a tweener, right? He's one of those guys who I think can go either way. And I did an analysis years ago where I looked at quarterbacks who were in like the top 100 in the rankings. And what you saw was the completion percentage sort of dictated a floor. Like anybody over 65, 66, 67% who was in top 100 recruits tended to have like average performance unless their yards per attempt were really low in that Del Rio range or below 9. And then those guys tended to flame out pretty highly. Philo's somewhere in between. And so I think this is one of those where it's relying on Faulkner. It's trusting Faulkner. It's saying, hey, his projection, he's seen the guy and knows what he can do and has seen him in practice. And so you anticipate that having that sort of inside information means that he knows he's getting a deal for the guy that he's bringing in. But in no circumstances do I think Philo is a sure thing looking at the stats, whether it's college stats or whether it's high school stats. Again, I look at Garrett Nussmeier, 72% completion percentage in high school, 9.5 yards per attempt. That's really similar to what Philo put up in high school as well, his senior year. And so, we all know how much I loved Garrett Nussmeier. So again, this is one of those where I think it can go either way. And I think it's something that, but the good news is we haven't locked ourselves in for 4 years.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll also, to be honest, this isn't something where if I were a quarterback who wanted to get SEC experience and potentially was like a backup, like I just recognized that I was like a permanent backup. Like Florida's a really attractive place. If you're sitting there going, I'm probably not good enough. Like I could start at, a Tulane, or I could start at, one of the Sun Belt schools or something.
Arkansas
like that.
State.
Arkansas State. Whatever it is. But I could be a backup who could then get an opportunity to shine if I went to a place like Florida, or even potentially would have the opportunity to compete for the starting position at Florida. So the only thing there then, I guess, is the connection between Georgia Tech, Philo, and Faulkner, where if I were a guy on the outside, I'd be a little bit concerned that he's the handpicked guy. And certainly he's got a jump up in the competition when it comes to that sort of stuff. So, but again, as long as you're not spending like $3, $4, $5 million on Philo,
Yeah.
I think it's fine. I think if you're wasting, 10% of your cap or 10% of your available funds on a guy who you're unsure about or who isn't a sure thing, then that's probably not wise, which again goes back to the discussion earlier of you can pay more for Baugh if you're paying less for Philo in terms of their overall percentage of the allocation that you got to make.
Yeah, good stuff there with the quarterback there, Aaron Philo working his way in. Tramel Jones, Will Griffin too, of course. So I saw somebody bring him up in and asked, would he wait 2 years? I think so. Wants to be a Gator. 2 years is not a ridiculous ask. Redshirt this year, so you'll save a year. So I think, go from there.
Unless he wins the job.
Unless he wins that. I don't think it will happen this year. But
I don't know, man. I think like if you're a coach and Griffin comes in, he's just slinging the ball around in practice, and he's clearly the best player. Like I think you have to play him.
Oh yeah,
because if he recognizes he's the best player, then the next year he's going to go someplace. And in order to get like sort of average play out of somebody with experience in my system, I've avoided putting a guy who's a star out there. I think you got to get the star out there when you can, because there's nothing keeping him there anymore. Yeah. And so, I think every year it's a competition, and any coach who doesn't make it a real open competition is going to face consequences for that. If there's anybody any good behind him on the depth chart.
All right. And breaking news, Florida beats Georgia in basketball. Always good when we can beat Georgia. That's Will, your and I's schedule. My daughter has cheer on Monday and Wednesday. You have baseball on Monday. So most of our episodes have already said we're going to be on Tuesday nights. A lot of Florida basketball games are going to be on Tuesday nights. So I know Bull Gator will listen to this. Bull Gator, I'm sorry. He hates when we have an episode live when basketball's on, but it just is going to happen.
Turns out we have families.
Yes. So it's just going to happen more this year. I'll still keep up with basketball. I had it on the tablet right here. You probably see me looking over. But
boy, I'm
quickly. Todd Golden cannot win the SEC opener to save his life. But here we go. Turns around, right around, beats a good Georgia team by 17 points at home. I love it.
I'm just really depressed we got rid of Mike White. Like I love that guy. He made the tournament every year. I don't know what we were doing with getting rid of that guy and letting him go to Georgia. It was just a terrible job by Scott Strickland. How could he have allowed that to happen? And this Golden guy, he's gonna flame out. I mean, geez, only one national championship thus far. How dare he? Like the guards can't make 3-pointers now,
and still beat a good Georgia team. They're better, but 17-point win.
I mean, they'll make the tournament and then they'll get beat in the first round.
All right. Keeping it going here, transfer portal talk as we took a left turn to basketball just for a second. But hey, we beat Georgia, so I mean, we can't do it on football field. So I got to get it where I can. So, and the whole Mike White connection, of course, made it even more of a rivalry. So, all right, keeping it going here. Bailey Stockton from Georgia Tech also got a commitment from him, and of course played high school ball with Philo and at Georgia Tech the last couple of years too. 21 catches for 233 yards this past season for his college career. 5'11", 185 pounds. He has 38 receptions for 439 yards and 1 touchdown. A 68.9 PFF grade this past season. A 74 PFF grade in 2024. Lined up in the slot 94.3% of the time. So thinking about your options with Trey Wilson being out, got to think him and maybe Davion Gross, true freshman, fighting for some slot snaps here for the Gators under Buster Faulkner in year one. So very familiar. There's some more familiarity with Buster Faulkner coming in this time at the wide receiver spot. Will, you brought his name up earlier. Let's go to running back. It was big news today for the Gators. Cincinnati transfer running back Evan Pryor, 5'9", 195-pound running back originally from North Carolina. For the 2025 season, ran for 522 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns on 76 carries. But this past season was impacted by an ankle injury in October. In the 2024 season at Cincinnati, he rushed for 418 yards and 6 touchdowns on 56 carries. 4 of his 6 touchdowns were for at least 55 yards. So you do, bringing up your point earlier, have Jaden Ball, you're between the tackles guy. I've said it earlier. Look, if I had to nitpick anything about Jaden Ball, maybe the lack of home run threat, not all on him, but I'm just having to nitpick a little bit. Sue me if you want. But might be getting it here. So I think good compliment to Jaden Ball right here with that big home run threat. In his first 4 collegiate seasons thus far, his first 3 were played at Ohio State, followed by 2 seasons at Cincinnati. Ran for 1,087 rushing yards, 10 touchdowns on 172 carries, a 75.1 PFF grade in 2025, 75.8 PFF grade in 2024. In 25, this past year, 319 yards after contact, and in 2024, 282 yards after contact. So about 5 yards after contact per attempt there in 2024. 16 missed tackles forced in 25, 10 missed tackles forced in 2024, a 92.7 elusive grade in this past season, and 78 in 2024. So somebody will, I think, a little shiftier, maybe got a little more of a top gear than Jaden Ball. Good change of pace back right here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I made the joke earlier that all of Florida's other running backs were Jaden Ball light, which meant that you couldn't, you didn't bring in a guy on third down to do and it's funny, Florida would do that, right? They would just rotate in their guys series for series. And are you really using Jaden Baugh in the best way you can if on third down he's your outlet? And he's not, he can make guys miss, but he's not taking one to the house on the little dump off. Pryor is a guy who might be able to take one to the house on a little dump off, screen games, little sort of option route. You think about like Christian McCaffrey, some of the stuff he runs against linebackers, like those sorts of things would be stuff that Pryor would be able to do when he's spelling Baugh. So, if the defense doesn't have to look and see, okay, which running back is in so that we know who our personnel is going to be, that does make a difference, right? It gets exhausting over time. And then you mentioned Stockton. I mean, I think about VB3, Wilson, Florida's just trying to supplement that space. So again, somebody that Faulkner knows, somebody that Philo knows, and Florida just needs reliable behind the 2 explosive guys, right? Like
TJ Abrams coming back too, and that maybe slot role a little bit too. So
and again, I mean, I still think, we're only 11 incoming transfers. We got 31 guys in the portal. So there's still going to be an opportunity to add people. Absolutely. And as the merry-go-round starts to slow down, I think there are going to be some opportunities to bring guys in who either thought they were going to be able to upgrade or had, I'm going to get an offer right off the bat and just are going to sort of be left by the wayside. So I think there's going to be opportunities to add people as depth pieces as we go. Again, I think Stockton is somebody who fits within that framework of Faulkner knows him. And let's not underestimate, there is value to having guys who know your system in some capacity, right? Like as you're trying to install, as you're trying to get the position groups together, like all that sort of stuff, having guys who know what you're trying to do. And honestly, when we start talking about the offensive line, that's going to be a big part of it too, right? Because, and even special teams, because we took all of Tulane's kickers. So,
hey, and not only that, for Stockton, might even be an option as a punt returner. He did some of that at Georgia Tech as well.
So there you go. I mean, I think, effective day for Florida on the offensive side. I think they've sort of locked. I would say that they've locked in a pretty significant floor when you factor in Pryor, Baugh, Stockton, Philo, a couple of guys on special teams, some of the offensive line, and then I honestly, I think defense is the place. There's some guys here, but defense is the place where I would expect them to be focusing next.
Yep. Pryor, 16th ranked running back in the portal as well. So pretty good get there overall for the Gators. So, Will, you mentioned it and familiarity along the offensive line. I previewed it the other day. Pretty in depth with these guys. Now it is official. Offensive lineman TJ Shanahan from Penn State, of course, connected there with Phil Trotwine coming from Penn State to Florida. Shanahan also, look at there, grew up in Orlando. So returning home a bit. Cousin to former Gator offensive lineman, John Jalapillo. So he said it was kind of weird to see Jalapillo name on somewhere on campus as a captain that they have somewhere in the stadium. He said that was pretty good. One more thing I want to go back right quick, Will, before I move forward. Pryor, something interesting here. Mentioned in an interview today, Buster Faulkner was able to show him some 2-back sets from Georgia Tech. So Ball, Pryor on the field at the same time. TJ Taylor brought that up. That's what reminded me. Double running back backfield incoming. Buster about to have a field day like that. That reminded me of something in the interview there. So, but back to Shanahan, of course.
Hold on. I'll believe that when I see it because I still think that DeMarcus Bowman is going to show up and go into the double backfield. So, I'll fully on board. I'll believe when I see it.
Seth did have it in the film review. He did have some 2-back set there from Drew.
Is Lorenzo Lingard coming back? What we got here? It's time.
So, of course, for Shanahan, connection to Florida school, of course, through family and being in Orlando, closer to home here. Began his career at Texas A&M and then transferred, of course, to Penn State and saw action at both guard spot and at center. Played one season for the Nittany Lions this past season, 419 snaps across 12 games, started matchups against UCLA, Northwestern, Iowa, and Ohio State, missed the Indiana game, and then brought back to earn a spot in the Pinstripe Bowl. So Shanahan, a run blocking grade of 59.2, a good pass blocking grade of 76.6 in 419 snaps. So I went and compared it to what we saw on Florida's offensive line last year. As I mentioned, Shanahan, a run blocking grade of 59.2. Najee Harris from Florida had 63.5, so pretty close there. Harris had a 74.9 pass blocking grade. Shanahan had a 76.6 pass blocking grade, so a little higher in that regard. And then Damian George, of course, part of last year, he had a 62.9 run blocking grade. So still pretty close, and then a 70.2 pass blocking there for Damian George. So it's kind of what you're getting here as far as PFF's grades go from Shanahan, very similar to Harris and George. Harris, I think, would still be in the incumbent for the left guard spot, and then I think Shanahan in competition for the right guard spot there with Rod Kearney returning for the Gators as well. And then one more from Penn State, probably more a tackle spot here for offensive lineman Eagan Boyer. Part of the 2024 Penn State class as a true freshman in the 2024 season, appeared in 4 games there for Penn State. And then as a redshirt freshman this past season, played in 8 games. PFF only giving him grades for 3 games, 4 offensive snaps versus Villanova, 2 snaps versus Michigan State, and then 78 versus Clemson in the bowl game with a grade of 50.1 for that game, for whatever it's worth. Given the experience, like I said, I think we'll compete for the left tackle spot that is obviously open after Austin Barber leaving there for the Gators. So we'll go back to the theme of familiarity here. And if there's one spot you'd like to have it, I think part of this too, Will, is just having a background with these coaches and these coaches wanting to bring these guys in. Obviously, you would hope that means they see something in these guys, and they know these guys. They know if they think they'll be successful or not. I don't think you're bringing in these guys. Oh, they got experience, I'll just bring them in. I mean, I think you want to impress early on, and then in some ways bring in guys that you trust. And I brought this up in the last episode too, Will, somewhat to help bring along other guys as well. I mean, this is to me an extension of the coaching staff in some ways to help other players learn from their peers.
I mean, I guess it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, like there was a lot of chuckling as James Madison filled out their staff under Billy Napier. I know I texted you at least a couple of times that I hope you and I are as good of friends as Billy Napier and all the people on his staff. So like, there's
when the next Gators breakdown or when the next Gators podcast I start comes up, you still want to be a part of it.
Hey, there we go. After people throw us out on our ass for whatever, for whatever we do on this one. I think so. That's the first part, right? Is that just because you have familiarity does not mean that they're going to be successful. But if you told me that Florida was going to go to the portal and get a left tackle and a guard with significant Power 5 experience, I'd go, good. like those are the kinds of guys you need to bring in. And we're in a Moneyball era now where if you think about it, like these guys started at Penn State. And one of the things I can remember doing years ago is looking at like 5-star, 4-star, 3-star recruits and saying, okay, how often do these guys get drafted in the NFL? How often do these guys contribute? And it was always a percentage, right? It was like 70% of the 5-stars wound up getting drafted in the NFL. Like 20% of the 4-stars wound up getting drafted in the NFL. And maybe like another 25% were contributors. So you had like a 1 in 2 shot that a 4-star recruit was going to be a contributor. Well, here you've got 2 guys who you already know are Power 5 contributors, right? And so you've gotten sort of over that hump where you've now it's now a 1 in 1 shot that these guys will be Power 5 contributors. And now the question is, you've got a 1 in 2 shot that they're going to get drafted. And so that's what you're really working with. And so in many ways, the portal has de-risked some of the funds that are going to these guys because you've already gotten to see them on the field and see what they do. I still think it comes down to a quality of play per dollar, right? I mean, and we don't know what the deals are for these guys. And if you look at interior offensive linemen, they need necessarily to be paid worse than tackles overall in terms of what it takes to bring people in. And then the familiarity is just the cherry on top, right? I mean, if this was a guy for Rutgers who'd started 7 games, I'd be happy with that too. I think, finding guys who've played in the Big Ten on the offensive line and have been somewhat successful is just like finding a quarterback who's played a few games and you're trying to project what he's going to do and figure out exactly, what you can get out of him. It's not like Curt Cignetti knew Fernando Mendoza from Cal when he brought him in. Like he didn't have like prior knowledge. He didn't know Curtis Rourke. I don't think is it O'Rourke? I can't remember. Whoever he had last year's quarterback. Yeah. Like he had seen him at Michigan State, I'm sure, but it wasn't like he was like intimately familiar with that guy. But still was able to turn those guys into elite players because Curt Cignetti is a really good coach. And I think that's going to be the challenge here in all this is Phil Troutwine and Buster Faulkner and John Sumrall are going to have to prove that they're really good coaches in order to get the most out of these guys, both from an evaluation perspective, but also from a teaching simplicity, making sure that they're getting guys in the right place. I mean, I said multiple times last year, I didn't think there was anything wrong with Billy Napier's offense. I thought what was wrong was the play sequencing and the predictability of the offense. And so, you still got to be able to execute. And whether you went to Penn State and Phil Troutwine, doesn't really matter now that you're at Florida, other than maybe it got you to Florida. But there's no free rides at this point. These guys, if nothing else, though, I think are significant depth pieces, even if they don't end up being the starter. And sort of the same thing I said with Philo. Like these guys were starters, at least in some capacity, at Penn State, which means the expectation is they're starting quality for an offensive line at a big-time Power 5 school or Power 4 school. And so if the guys that Florida already has in the fold beat them out, awesome. Offensive line is going to be way better than it was last year.
All right, keeping it going here. I'll go to James Madison for tight end Lakota Dupree. He comes to Gainesville, of course, after spending this past season with the Dukes, where he played some played some tight end for the Dukes. 6'4", 253-pound tight end, so a strong blend of size and physicality here for the tight end room. Showed ability to impact game receiver and blocker, more blocking tight end here. Finished the season, of course, 15 receptions, 187 yards, 3 touchdowns. and then had some carries as well. They had a touchdown in the playoff game against Oregon on a carry he took around the edge. So they moved him around a little bit. He moved around some formations there. So began his career at Charlotte, where he initially played defensive line before transitioning back to offense. So there's your offensive look there for the portal gets for the Florida Gators. Now we go to defense, and will the big get on defense go to Jacksonville State? Emmanuel, Oyebadejo, I mean, got the frame you'd like, 6'7", 315 pounds, much needed size and experience. He's the 11th ranked defensive lineman on the On3 transfer rankings. Guess what? Only one spot below Mekhi Burrows. So by that metric, just a switch up right here for Oyebadejo and Mekhi Burrow. Originally from England, developed into a physical presence in the trenches since arriving in college. I mean, size, length, that is what you want right there in the middle. Kind of line up multiple spots with that size along the defensive front. So this past season, full-time starter there at Jacksonville State, started all 14 games for him. Finished the year with 43 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, forcing 2 fumbles, breaking up 5 passes at the line of scrimmage. He recorded at least 1 sack in 4 different games. So good run defender, pass rusher as well. 653 total snaps, an 81.7 PFF grade. That means if you're looking at the PFF chart, there's a lot of green on it. So 78.9 run defense grade, 58.9 tackling grade, 76.4 pass rushing grade there. So that was the big get right now on the defensive side of the ball. Will Miles going to Jacksonville State, getting an impact defensive lineman. As I said, Mekhi Burrow leaving out, of course, transferring away. Caleb Banks going to the NFL. Florida needed to get an impact defensive lineman here.
Yeah, I mean, so all of the statistics I think are relevant, but I am old enough to remember when we had Joey Slackman and all of his PFF grades coming from the Ivy League, and that was the question, right? Is as it goes up in competition, what's he going to be able to do? At the same time, I don't think Mekhi Burrow was a guy who, like, I looked at and said, "Wow, there's a game changer on the defensive line." So if you think about, like,
we also had Cam Jackson from Memphis.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Slackman's actually probably an outlier versus some of the guys that you're bringing in.
What a miss that was.
Well, I mean, we talked all offseason about that guy. Like, think about what'll happen if they can dominate on the defensive line. Florida has struggled to get pressure with its front four for years now. When they have been able to get pressure with their front four, the defense has actually been pretty good. And given some of the limitations that we've seen in the defensive backfield over the past 4 or 5 years, that teaches us a pretty significant lesson, which is that if you're able to dominate on the defensive line, then it doesn't really matter what you've got at corner and safety, because you can make the quarterback uncomfortable. And whether Oyebadejo will be able to do that for Florida is yet to be seen, but certainly, again, there's only really one guy in the transfer portal that I look at and go, man, I wanted to see that guy stay. That's Jaden Woods. Everybody else, I'm like, these guys are pretty replaceable. And, that doesn't mean that I didn't like Aaron Gates. That doesn't mean that I didn't think Jacoby Jackson was a good player. That didn't mean that Sharif Denson and Eugene Wilson didn't give us stuff.
And we all like Aiden Mizell and Trey Wilson, but just injuries and not being on the field. And, when you sign Dallas Wilson and you sign Vernell Brown III, I mean, those guys weren't good. I think Aiden Mizell, especially Trey Wilson, expect to get starter money. Are you really going to pay him that much after I'd rather have VB3 and Dallas Wilson.
Well, and I mean, again, production wise,
yeah,
the only guy that I look at and go, wow, like significant production that we're losing and projects to get better is Jaden Woods. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm happy to have a guy come in at defensive line with significant starting experience. And, PFF grades are great because they tell you that the person is playing within the scheme. Right? Like that's really what they're grading with the PFF grades. They're saying, did he do the right thing on the play every time? And, more so not last year, but 2 years ago, and especially under Patrick Toney, the Florida defense looked like one where the players didn't trust each other to do what their jobs were. And everybody was trying to cover for somebody else, and you wound up with a bunch of blown coverages. hopefully that's not going to happen as they're playing cover 3 continuously with Coach White. And look, anytime you can get any sort of pressure from the defensive line, or if you can prevent the offense from being able to establish a running game, it's a big deal. So, Florida still has more work to do when it comes to bringing in guys in the trenches, but this is a good start.
All right, and then up front as well, not as much as an impact player here, Baylor defensive lineman DK Kalu officially visited this weekend, did commit to the Gators as well. 6'4", 309 pounds, so some more size there in the middle. Redshirt sophomore, started 6 games for Baylor this past season, finished the year with 10 total tackles, 5 solo stops. He has 2 seasons of eligibility remaining. So you have, now the mix, up front, Oyebadejo, you have DK Kalu there from Baylor. Throw them in the mix. Jamari Lyons, Brendan Bett, we'll see. I still think he's probably going to return, but we haven't heard any official signing from the Florida Victorious tweet, or from everything I've heard, I think Brendan Bett likely to come back, but just put a question mark there for now. So Jamari Lyons, Brendan Bett, question mark. Joseph Mbachu, Jeremiah McLeod. That's your interior defensive lineman. So got some numbers here better now. I still will, if it's me, target another bigger, truer nose tackle type if I can throw into the mix right here. So that's probably what I'm looking for as a transfer portal as we continue now. Getting 2 interior defensive linemen here, but giving me one, with more nose tackle type.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, the guys who are in the portal right now, Tavoris Brown, and like you mentioned, Mekhi Baru, and DK Kalu and Emmanuel Oyebadejo, those are pretty decent replacements for those guys, right? I don't know that you've necessarily made some giant jump,
right?
But I think you've prevented yourself from having some giant hole. And in many ways, if Florida gets average quarterback play last year, we're talking about 7-5, 8-4. And so if people want to see Florida, if John Sumrall came in and went 8-4 next year, what would people say about his first year? Success?
Yeah.
I think most people would say 8-4 with a bowl game, establishing Philo, Baugh off to the NFL. But hey, now we've got sort of a track record of offensive success. Faulkner had a great year, but one more year and he'll be set up to be a head coach himself. You can see a narrative where if things turn that way, and I don't think Florida's defense was awful. I think Florida's I think they outperformed some of their underlying statistics, but I think they were awful. And I think, just even in many cases, maintaining the status quo while improving quarterback play will lead to a few more wins next year. Now, obviously, you'd love to increase productivity everywhere along the way. And these are guys that I'm sure that Sumrall and his staff are familiar with, right? It's not like they have never evaluated these guys or recruited any of the guys they're going after, have relationships with all these guys. So hopefully they get more out of it. But like I said, I think in terms of the holes that have opened up on the defensive line, or at least at defensive tackle, those holes have been filled up. We'll see what they're able to do. I still have my fingers crossed for Keon Keeley. That guy was a freak when Knudsen went to one of his high school games and sent me sent me film back when he was somebody that Florida was pursuing, and it was oh my God, that is just ridiculous how fast the guy is. He's just real tall, skinny, lanky kid, but coming off a defensive end, just able to overpower everybody. And then I saw him this year for Alabama, and I'm like, oh, he's gained 50 pounds and he's still fast.
He had a so-so year. He hasn't probably lived up to the billing. Got better as the season went on. So,
I think
did hit the portal. I guess go back to my point right quick. Burrow 350, Oyebadejo 315, Kalu 309. So that's when I say a little bigger nose tackle type. I still think you go attack that if you can.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, I think it this will be an imperfect roster year one. Right. I think you're going for players, not need in most circumstances, right? If you told me you had to allocate funds to a defensive end or a 350-pound defensive tackle, I would say, which one's better? right? Like, I think you got to get the best players and then sort of let the pieces fall where they may.
Yep.
I don't now, obviously, you can't sit there with 75 corners and no linebackers. So there is like, it's not completely true, but I mean, if you're sitting there sort of deciding between two guys and you have to allocate funds to one person together, I still think you go with a more talented player. So, in this case, you're not like desperate for that 350-pound guy on the inside. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that there are going to be gaps on the roster, though. And I think people need to understand that year one, because the needs of your team are not going to perfectly align with the economics and the availability of guys in the portal, you might be better off coming in under budget this year, because that 350-pound nose tackle that you need to really stuff the run will be available next year. And so that's the other thing, is that we think of this in terms of like a salary cap, but it's really not, because these are funds that are like coming from donors, right? And so if Florida spends 20 million on its roster this year, but they had budgeted 30, well, then do they have 40 for next year? And, over the 2-year period, do they spend an average of 30, but are they able to build the roster in a way that's better, or vice versa, right? Is it better to spend 40 this year, build everything up, win a bunch of stuff, but then recognizing that you'd have to pull back next year? I think those are all questions that programs are going to have to answer, because this isn't the NFL where the teams have a set cap every year and they can't go over it, and there's no real advantage to going under. And so so you just sort of have the same machinations every year. I think, again, this is one of the reasons why I think the GM becomes really important, because he's got to be able to understand and dictate and project who's going to be available in 2027. Like in January 2027, there's going to be a whole flush of players again. Are we going to be cash rich, and are we going to be able to win those battles next year in a way that maybe some of these other programs aren't, who are blowing their wad this year? Or are we going to be a team that goes out and spends a ton of money this year and then is in battles where we can't outspend next year just because the funds are limited? So, it's not just a one-year proposition. I think that's something you guys got to keep in mind.
All right. And then we'll go, DJ Coleman, we already talked about last episode of Gators Breakdown, got it covered there. And then going to safety now, just Matt Zenitz of CBS Sports, of course. And now he initially reported Kentucky defensive back, safety Cam Dooley entering the portal, top 200 overall recruit, posted 29 tackles and an interception this past season. Of course, played under new Florida safety coach Chris Collins at Kentucky and Brad White, so look out for him. I think another name to look out for, Wake Forest wide receiver Micah Mays. I would say, while we're talking about possible next guys to pop, is another one there as we look at guys. There's some spots left, like Will said. I mean, you're looking at 11 here. Florida's got about 30 guys who have left and went to the portal. So I think you're probably looking at 25-ish at least guys probably making up the transfer portal class here for the Gators. So some more names to look out for you there. And we'll see if any more visits are happening anytime soon on the horizon as well. So special teams, you mentioned it, Will. We'll go back over one more time. Heavy Tulane flavor here. Kicker Patrick Durkin, punter Alec Clark, both committing to the Gators. Of course, you brought in special teams coordinator from Tulane as well, Jonathan Galante. Impressive unit in 2025. Tulane's kicker Patrick Durkin, he was named American Conference Special Teams Player of the Year. Durkin finished the regular season tied for second nationally with 24 field goals, in addition to being ranked fifth nationally with 66 touchbacks on 77 kicks. And then the Green Wave's punter, Alec Clark, led the American Conference with a 46.82 punting average on his 45 attempts. Both Durkin and Clark earned AAC first-team honors. So there we go. Special teams being taken care of with commitments through Tulane. So, and then some more big news, of course, mentioned it earlier, but kind of going to your point of what you put out there. Of a player we'd like to have back in the fold. We'll see how the visit goes as John Summerall, Brad White, Bam Hardman meeting with Jaden Woods in Kansas, flying the jet out to Kansas here, Will, and meeting with the second-year player, of course. Hearing Florida does have a backup plan if Woods decides to go elsewhere, but certainly, like you, would love to get one in the fold here. That was in the fold a year ago in orange and blue, but it's a crazy transfer portal world we live in. It did put his name into the portal. Has visited Texas. Georgia might be getting into the mix as well there for Jaden Woods. So see where it goes. But the staff felt the need, felt the importance, of going out there and flying to Kansas and meeting with one Jaden Woods.
Yeah, I mean, it turned like you sort of mentioned Baugh not being in the transfer portal. Woods goes into the transfer portal, but the reality all that means is that people can legally contact him, as opposed to him texting Jabbar Jalouk. Baugh texting Jabbar Jalouk. He's just my buddy. That's who I'm texting, right?
Yeah.
I think it's really 6 and 1/2 dozen of the other. I think maybe it's a little bit more visible. And, it's funny, like these kids get recruited and then they come and, think about like the Urban Meyer era. Kids get recruited and then he's like, I treat my stars like stars and my shit like shit. It's like, once you get to campus, you're no longer wanted in the same way that you were before. I think that's changed a little bit, obviously, with the transfer portal, but certainly this indicates like when you're a freshman and you go show out and you show flashes and you show ability, that you're going to have to keep the foot on the gas to keep those guys there. Retention is obviously a huge part of the job now for these guys. And is going to be something they're going to have to project. So, yeah, I mean, look, when you got a guy who plays well in the SEC as a freshman and you project him from a size perspective, from a physicals perspective, as being a good defensive end in the SEC, yeah, you want to keep a guy like that. But again, I still think it comes back to what are the available funds? And at some point, the number gets high enough where you just go, hey, the replacement is 80% of what we would have gotten with you. And, that's good enough for year one because we want to save the rest for year 2, year 3, year 4. And those are all calculations that Summerall's going to have to make. I think, Baugh from an optics perspective probably makes a loss of Woods a little bit easier to take. Like if you'd have lost both Woods and Baugh, like to lose your best defensive player and your best offensive player, not best defensive player, but maybe your most promising defensive player. Like
because Miles Graham's going into his third year, so when you talk about potential, you're like, well, Miles Graham, if he plays up to potential, we only got him for one more year. You're going to your potential projection. That's Jaden Woods.
But I guess from an optics perspective, right? Like if you started ticking off the guys that John Summerall would have wanted to keep from last year's team, Woods is on that list, right?
Yeah. So there's been, like I said, the group was Ball, DB3, Dallas Wilson, Miles Graham, Jaden Woods. Like,
yeah. So if you end up
that was a 5.
So if you end up with 4 out of 5, I think it's hard to complain about the optics of keeping 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
If Ball had gone to Texas and then Woods stays in the portal, well, now you're talking about 3 out of 5. And oh, by the way, VB3 is a legacy. And so, was it really 2 out of 5 and Miles Graham's a legacy? So was it really 1 out of, you can start making arguments that this is incompetent, but allowing those folks to go. So I think Baugh probably relieves the pressure a little bit on needing to get Woods, which means they can hold fast to what they think the real value of the kid is. And again, I think he's worth a significant amount. I think he's going to bring a lot of value to whatever team he goes to based on what we saw this year. But it's not like he had 14 sacks, right? Like we're not getting Myles Garrett out there at defensive end, and it's like, hey, like this guy's worth throwing the kitchen sink at the defensive end. And so, hey, if we retain him, great. But I do think this is a place where Florida has to be wise in terms of this is our number. This is where we sit in terms of cap. So I've got $1.5 million as the starter average for an edge rusher. And then $3 million total allocated for edge rushers in general for an overall roster. So, if you think about
I think the deal with him is probably wanting to win. Like, I don't know if it's so much. I mean, look, a lot of people will fall back on it's always about money. And in regard, that's true a lot of the time. And it is a factor. But the gist I get and the vibe I get from some of it is wanting to go somewhere and win.
I mean, 4-8 sucks, right? I mean, you and I felt it. I mean, 3 games in, you're like, geez, again?
Yeah.
Like, we got to go through this whole another season. It's just a slog.
And he was just a freshman.
Well, and the players feel that, and the negativity around campus and around the program and all that sort of stuff exists. I don't blame him. And let's be honest, the money's not going to be that different.
Mm-mm.
No matter where you go. It's not like,
Nope.
like Florida's going to offer him 1.3 million and the next best offer is going to be 500,000, right? Like that's not where the decision's going to be. Now, I mean, if Texas Tech gets involved, then maybe it's more.
I thought they might already be loaded up on edge, but
well, I mean, whatever. Like just spend 100 million. It doesn't sound like that booster has any. Like there are no financial limitations over there in Lubbock. But you get what I'm saying, right? Like let's say he was looking for 800,000. Like the offers are going to be 750, 800, 850, and he's going to have to make a decision. Where do I actually want to go? And I mean, in many ways, it's kind of the same way I think the rest of us are, right? Is that if you're not the elite of the elite of the elite, and you can't like dictate exactly where you're going to go or get the highest dollar, I could go get a job someplace else tomorrow, but it's not that much more money, and I like what I do. So, if I like who I work with and I like what I do and they pay me fairly, I'm not necessarily going to always be looking around for something a little bit more. I think that's sort of what you're saying, right? Is that, if the money is approximately equivalent, then you got to pick the situation that you think is going to keep you happiest. And if it was a miserable situation at Florida last year because of the record, because of the losing, because of the sort of the environment and the energy, I can understand why someone would go, well, maybe Alabama or maybe Texas or maybe Ohio State or something like that. If you have the opportunity to go to one of those places, I think it would be foolish to not explore it, especially considering that that you're no longer playing for the coach that you committed for.
Interesting angles to all this, man. Interesting angles to it. I mean, like I said, we just spent almost an hour and a half with all these, Jaden Ball not entering the portal, but of course there was so much talk, and then returning to Florida. So many names we did talk about who did enter the portal from other schools. Florida getting them, and then so there's so many angles to it all, man.
Well, it's interesting because before we came on, we were talking about how like the information coming out for the program today is like a fire hose, right? Yeah. And I think some of that is NCAA oriented, right? The transfer portal being as narrow as it is, not having a spring portal put some juice in this one as well, right? There's not a second opportunity, a second bite at the apple coming up in the spring. So certainly that does it too. But, I always sort of made the joke of like Billy Napier being like an old man settling into a bath. Like just, it felt like everything moves slow. Like we made adjustments slowly that, that it was, we'll sort of see how things shake out and then we'll move. And, that does not appear to be the mode of operation for this staff. You can criticize some of their evaluations. You might criticize some of the guys they bring in, but, to have 11 guys already in the fold and many of those guys at prime positions of need for the organization, I think sets up Florida to now be able to go out and start picking off the guys who maybe aren't in an area of need, but can provide significant value to the organization. And so, I'm not ready to give John Sumrall an A. In fact, I won't give John Sumrall an A until we're celebrating a 10th win at some point along the way. But I think Florida is better today than they were yesterday, certainly. And so, and better relative to its competition as well, compared to where they were yesterday. And I think that that's an important step forward for the program.
All right. Good stuff. So I have no idea, like I said, schedule's all over the place now with my daughter having 2 basketball games a week on Mondays and Wednesdays. So if it gets crazy, I might do a chat tomorrow night, by the way. I actually did. We talked to Gators Breakdown Plus members earlier today. Might do a chat because, lo and behold, I don't know if people realize it, the first college football playoff game Thursday night. Yes. Yep. I don't really want to do an episode Thursday night. I really want to watch that game. And the next one is Friday, so we'll see. But if it is Thursday, maybe I can hop on before the game starts. That would be an option, I guess. But maybe easier with all the news from today. A great time to get with the Gators Breakdown Plus members in the Discord and chat it up with those guys and let others in Gator Nation hear others from Gator Nation's opinion on everything. But just looking over here, I mean, the Discourse going crazy right now. So I'm already picking at it. If you don't want to wait for a chat, guys, you can go and join Gators Breakdown Plus and go take part in the Discord right now. So, all right, Will, nailed another episode. First one of 2026 for us as a duo, man. And Yeah, here we go. Transfer. I mean, we got another like week of this, week and a half. I mean, because a little bit longer because the teams that are playing in the 4-team and then the national championship game, of course, will have players going to the portal as well. So, and that's just the date to enter. You know, I think the 15th, 16th, just the last day you can enter. So, because of classes and all that kind of stuff, it'll get settled pretty fast. But I think we got another like week and a half, 2 weeks of this thing.
Hey, I used to call National Signing Day my own personal Christmas. So apparently now transfer portal season's my Hanukkah. It's like multiple days along the way. We need a transfer portal menorah to celebrate this. But yeah, it's an interesting time. Certainly, I suspect that I will be looking at my phone at work more than I normally should and probably should. But we'll figure it out as we go. And it'll be really nice to know what the roster is a couple of weeks from now and go, hey, that's what it is. Now we can start talking about what it means for the football team. And, there was always sort of this, like that spring portal, just like, you got Nico leaving Tennessee last year right at the last minute and Aguiar coming into Tennessee. You had all sorts of weirdness going on there. And I mean, I suppose there's still going to be some opportunities and hell, maybe it's not legal to have a transfer portal season like this and somebody's going to transfer and sue the NCAA to get an injunction. I don't know. But I like college football has not done anything that I have liked over the past 10 years in terms of like making the product better. And I think this actually has made the product better. So kudos to college football and the NCAA for setting up this 2-week transfer window. Cause this is something that I think fans can enjoy. And so what a concept to cater to your customer. I will say,
I don't really like the transfer portal overall, but if we have to have it, this is better.
Well, exactly, right? Like if you have to do it now the trick is getting the freaking games over before the portal actually opens.
Hey, Summerall talked about that in the thing too, in that podcast interview, and kind of going the Dan Lanning route of let's start week 0. I think 1 bye week, go into the postseason as soon as the season's over, no weeks off, season wrapped up by January 1st-ish.
I mean, they're gonna have to take some like muscle relaxants at the end of January and just like take the whole month of February off. Like given, I mean, I don't know what you do in the month of February. So there's nothing else to do on the calendar. The NBA really got this right in terms of like, the NBA didn't get everything right, but the NBA got a lot right in terms of all of its player movement. Like they let the season end. And then there's like a couple of weeks where no one's allowed to do anything and they actually punish people for tampering. And then everything sort of opens up. And so, all of the transactions occur at a time when no one would normally be talking about basketball. And so, from a product perspective, that works really, really well. Now, I get that there are other voices in the room and other complications with college football and that it's not technically a professional sport yet. But, the powers that be, I think there's a slow march toward professionalism here that I think will actually be good for the fan long term. And I know it's frustrating for people as we move towards there because it can be annoying as it's sort of a quasi professional space. But like I said, for nerds like me, where I'm sitting there looking at like the economics of it and trying to project what's going to happen, I find it all fascinating. So hopefully it leads to a bunch of wins. That's all I got to say.
For sure. So, all right, everybody, that'll do it for this episode of Gators Breakdown. For Will Miles at Will Miles SEC. I'm David Waters at GatorDave_GB right there on X. Guys and girls out there, thank you for joining us for another episode of Gators Breakdown.